Well, here we are again, and you're probably a bit confused about why I'm talking about 3 Deluxe and not 2. And that's because 2 is just too scary and I'm not good enough yet. That aside, let's not waste any time and get right into this. Welcome friends to a video that dares to ask, is Pikmin 3 Deluxe good? In stark contrast to my relationship with Pikmin 1, the first time I ever played Pikmin 3 was about a year ago. And despite having a Wii U, yes, I'm one of those people, and a physical copy of it, I played Deluxe instead and I never even beat it, which is a tragedy I rectified while making this video. I played the story mode through, I played through all of the side stories, and a year ago I played an obscene amount of the bingo battle mode with my roommate at the time, which, by the way, you should definitely check out with a friend if you haven't already. It's a ton of fun and it will also ruin your friendship. After doing all this, how do I feel about the third installment in one of my favorite franchises? Well, I feel a lot of things, and I'm going to attempt to hold your attention captive while I therapize myself, though it's more likely I'm going to be popped onto your second monitor while you work because I do the same exact thing. First off, I won't be going into development or history or anything like that, at least not in this video, but it's not off the table for the future. Second, I'm going to try to keep advancements made in Pikmin 4 out of this. I want to look at 3 Deluxe how I would have at its release, or rather as close as I can. And third, thanks for joining me, I appreciate it and I love you. Upon booting up, this is what we are met with. Take everything I said about 1's title screen being pretty and tranquil and multiply it. This is gorgeous. I could dissect it for a while, but let's get to the meat because I have a huge entree for you today. Starting a new game lets us soak in the story with a fully voiced narration that's rather well done, and a beautiful cinematic that makes me think of Mass Effect with its title card. We then wake up as the fearless leader of our team, Charlie, with several yellow Pikmin examining us and probably wondering if Charlie's dead. After popping to his feet, the Pikmin run off, and we are in control now. The Pikmin are presented with so much personality already, lounging around in different places, in different poses as they watch curiously. Thankfully for us, Charlie catches on quick, and we have command of some yellow Pikmin. We're introduced pretty fluidly to the controls and basic mechanics as we clear the way forward, though it's already very clear this game will handle its tutorials very differently from the last 2 games. The same can be said of its presentation, being far more cinematic and expressive. Not to mention gorgeous to look at. Nintendo took a lot of care to use the Wii U's hardware and later the Switches to get the absolute most out of the huge amount of time the game was marinating for after 2's release. A mysterious fate quickly befalls Charlie, and we get control of our second captain and arguably main character, Alf. His priorities are the same as Charlie's, and the first thing he needs to do is find the other members of our squad, and Alf familiarizes himself with how Pikmin work very quickly. Again, the tutorial aspect is very different here, with new mechanics being introduced frequently and as fluidly as possible so returning players don't feel too bogged down with old information. Soon after gaining control, we find the Copad, which will be our map, communicator, and the source of a host of other functions. It also was Nintendo's cute way of integrating the Wii U gamepad, which I think was a pretty good use of it, not making it too intrusive or gimmicky, while also having it provide a mechanical advantage, though this Switch remaster proves it was as unnecessary as we all thought. I won't touch too much on the mechanics and flaws and such of 2, as it will get its own video at some point, but I will say the tutorializing of this game is far less intrusive and pace-breaking, if not a little hand-holdy at times, which is something I'll likely say a lot throughout this video, as if Pikmin 3 has one stark difference from the previous games, it's that it's comparatively very easy. After shoring up our numbers of red Pikmin and exploring forward, we intermittently get this little scene of a new function downloading onto our Copad. Cute. You may have noticed already, but there's a lot of change just in presentation alone here. Things are far more grand, everything feels much more dramatic and immersive. Gone is the distant feeling perspective of the previous games. We find our camera being more naturally third person rather than closer to top down. It feels very nice with the much more polished visuals and design. After getting through the tutorial area to our ship, Brittany gives us a ring on the Copad to tell us roughly where she is and tell us that she's okay, if not a bit hungry. We also learned that our biggest objective, aside from gathering fruit for our starving home planet, is to find our crew and the cosmic drive key for our ship. Without it, we're not getting home. Since we got to our ship and go into orbit, we get to see the new and improved area selection map, now presented very organically as an actual screen inside the ship. It feels like we're actually here with Alf, looking at a huge map of this alien planet, planning our next move strategically. Right now, our strategy is simply to get Brittany back with us, so let's set out to the Garden of Hope and get to work. In 3, the days are much longer than in the first 2 games, which is a good move in my opinion. The areas in 3 are far larger, with many interconnected parts and a lot to do, so giving us that extra time makes sense and keeps things just the right amount of stressful. It's a good balance. On the topic of improvements, I really like the change to constructing bridges. Now it's done by throwing or charging your Pikmin at piles of material. They'll run back and forth, building a bridge one piece at a time until it's complete. It feels very in tune with the Pikmin's ant-like nature. Though it can be rather annoying, as when the structure is built, the Pikmin will return to the place they got the materials rather than stay at the completed bridge. It does feel like a minor annoyance, but it can certainly make optimization a chore. As we get this area opened up to us, we see several things. We get our first glimpse of actual combat in Pikmin 3, which features a few changes. First, we have a lock-on function now. Just cursor over an item or an enemy and press the right trigger and it will lock onto that thing. This allows you greater mobility while fighting since the cursor is temporarily detached from your character. Second, the way we cycle Pikmin is different, and I'll touch on this more later, but you don't need to hold down the throw button to swap. Just a tap of the left or right bumper cycles you through the Pikmin and captains. Third, we have the ability to throw a stream of Pikmin by holding down the throw button while locked on rather than destroying our collective controllers by tapping the throw button like a caffeinated gerbil. The final change is one we'll look at in a bit. For now, we have eyes on both Brittany, separated from us by a glass wall, and our first fruit. The whole reason for coming here, our mission is to gather edible matter to solve Kopai's food crisis, and here we have a strawberry sitting enticingly. We can gather that, but what about Brittany? Well, if we go a little farther up this path, we can find rock Pikmin, one of the 2 new types in 3. They're tough as they look, these lads can't be crushed, and they pack a punch when they're thrown. They can also destroy glass and crystal and any other generally fragile substances in our way. This includes the bones of our enemies as well as their hopes and dreams. Right, rock boys in tow, we can take that glass wall down no problem and reunite with one of the best Pikmin characters ever, Brittany. She's adorable, feisty, capable, and has an adorable rapport with Alf. They deserve to find happiness together, and I won't hear arguments otherwise. She understands how the Pikmin work immediately, and we get a tiny tutorial about using our captains to reach higher or farther off places, which is a mechanic that Pikmin 3 handles reasonably well. 2 Pikmin types, 2 captains, and 1 very tasty looking piece of fruit. It's still early, but this first full day has already been very fruitful. Yellow Wollyhops. Just saying that likely gave you flashbacks to losing half your Pikmin to one in the first Pikmin game. But here in 3, they're a joke. Since rock Pikmin are immune to crushing, the Wollyhops telegraph a lot more, and generally most things have less health, we no longer have anything to fear from these amphibious antagonists. Speaking of things returning, we can find an electric gate in this area that we can't do anything with at the moment. Still worth bringing up to mention that electricity is no longer an insta-kill to your Pikmin, instead temporarily paralyzing them before eventually killing them if you don't shake them out of it with your whistle. And while I can complain about many things being made too easy in 3, I very much think this is better. All the other elemental dangers in 2 gave you the chance to save the Pikmin with your whistle, but electricity, death. Instant, unavoidable, just death. This feels a lot more balanced. We're introduced very early to the concept of having the captains and Pikmin split up to build a bridge from 2 sides of the same gap, and it's a very satisfying mechanic, though it can be a little irritating with how much backtracking and Pikmin swapping are required sometimes. Regardless, I really like it, and it's something that's even pushed to its limit in the side stories of Pikmin 3 Deluxe, which we will talk about later. What we can talk about now is how insanely good the fruit looks. I swear, there had to be at least one person at Nintendo whose entire job was just making the fruit for Pikmin 3 look absolutely mouth-watering. I could stare at this all day. Anyway, with the first real day done, we get another end of day log, all of which are rather entertaining and help flesh out our crew. And we're returned to the interior of our ship, the SS Drake, to plan the next move. Our next move being to find our fearless leader, Charlie, who, spoiler, is an absolute ultra chad, and don't you dare make fun of his rubber ducky or so help me. Fun facts given by Alf: Copites eat fruit, Hocketations eat veggies. This isn't important, but it's neat to know. I follow the signal on the copad, and we get our first boss fight in the form of this crystal-armored arthropod called an armored maudad. It is underwhelming. Compared to boss fights of 1 and 2, this is insultingly easy, and the sense of dread and stress that accompanied previous games' bosses is gone from this encounter despite its dramatic introduction cutscene. Upon dying, after taking out a grand total of 1 Pikmin, it spills its guts and reveals that truly, the only constant in life is an old Nokia phone. And some dragon fruit. Tasty. With this relic of a communication device acquired, our search area can expand, and our quest for Charlie can continue at another location. The captain's signal is coming from the distant tundra, so that's exactly where we're headed. And in typical Pikmin fashion, the SS Drake hits a rock formation on the way down, causing Brittany to fall from the ship. Wait, what? How does that even... Are they not belted in while in flight? Questions aside, this gives us more of that back and forth gameplay I mentioned earlier, with Brittany and Alf having to work on opposite sides of an area to establish a bridge. In this cave with Brittany is where we get the yellow Pikmin, and also introduces a good usage of them, using their electrical properties to complete a circuit to light up this cave. It's cute, and good to see the yellows getting more love. With enough of them sprouted and plucked, we can push this suspiciously placed sphere down the slope it's on and open up the cave, where upon exiting, our day begins proper. Now we can start tossing Pikmin back and forth between our captains to get this bridge built, and puzzles like this is where the lock-on mechanic shines, giving our Pikmin a safe landing area and making it easy to throw a stream of Pikmin across. As we gain more Pikmin types and captains, it's a good idea to touch on a few things. Let's start with the charge. Much to my dismay, our swarm ability from the previous games is G-O-N-E, gone, and in its place is the charge. At the press of a button, all Pikmin of the currently selected type will charge at whatever is in their path, which sounds great in theory, but in practice can frequently get in the way. You have to press the button for every color of Pikmin you want to charge. You can't do them all at once. And because captains are in the cycling of Pikmin types, sometimes you won't realize that a captain is selected when you try and charge. You might see where this is going. When that happens, it causes a few seconds of delay as it errors at the command before cycling to the next Pikmin type. And in a game like Pikmin, this unexpected delay can cause all kinds of problems. In addition to that, it really limits your ability to control the Pikmin's movement, as they generally charge straight forward. It may be obvious, but I don't like the charge very much. I will use it liberally as it's mechanically necessary to do so, but I won't do it happily. Once our couple is reunited, it's time to send this other suspiciously placed sphere crashing down through the wall below to open a path to our dear, sweet Charlie. Unfortunately for us, this cave is thoroughly dark, and the platforms here are plants that are sensitive to light. So after lighting up this little area, our reward is an absolutely delicious looking orange. Wouldn't want to get space scurvy, now would we? Our captain awaits, however, so press on we shall. And as we do, we are greeted with these horrid little abominations that spew out endlessly from these pulsating flesh jars. Let's get some light. Oh, sweet beer battered deep fried succulent fuck, what is that? Right, Pikmin 3 is now a horror game. Alright, this incredibly threatening thing is the Behemoth Fossbat, which is a level of wordplay I aspire to achieve one day, and it is our next boss. It's very well introduced, too. You get the terror of it appearing suddenly when you light up the cave, you get the idea that using light will be a mechanic to fight it, and you get to gather yourself before you go and engage it. The actual fight here is a huge step up from the armored maudad. It's tense, it's thrilling, it has you being hyper-vigilant as it stalks around in the dark, using yourself to bait it close to the light before turning it on and blinding it. And when blinded, it falls to the ground and thrashes about in pain before taking off back into the dark parts of the cave, cloaking itself in the deep darkness. It's not a particularly difficult fight, but it is very fun and engaging. Eventually, it will call on more of its awful children to try and impede you before it finally falls to your Pikmin's combined might. Upon its death, Charlie very casually frees himself from the depths of the Fossbat, seemingly very unfazed by the experience. Charlie has no time for fear or despair. He marches out, greets his crew, and without missing a beat, gets right to work with us after being filled in on the situation. This man is an absolute unit and a half, and I love him dearly. We also figure out that Olimar is here on PNF 404 once again, and our crew suspects he may have some knowledge about our cosmic drive key based on logs he's left behind. Right, new priorities. Find Olimar and grab all the fruit we can. The latter shouldn't be too hard for me given all the times I've been kicked out of the produce section at Walmart, so let's set our sights on Olimar. But before that, let's say you met with tragedy in that cave and lost all of your Pikmin. What would you do? What could you do? Well, among the many quality of life improvements in 3, there is a redo function. You can completely restart the day if you so desire. You can even go back and watch replays of your previous days so you can study and optimize better in the future. This is a really cool idea. It's one I never ended up using, but it's there. As we take our leave of the tundra, or any area, we're treated to this results screen, showing us all the fruit we gathered that day, as well as their fun new names, and seeing the juice that they make. I will shout it from the rooftops that the fruit here looks so appetizing, and the juice too. I want to eat all of it quite badly, but sadly I've been told by my doctor to stop licking my monitor, so I'll have to refrain. Now with Charlie back, we get to see his precious rubber ducky floating around in the ship, even occasionally floating by the area select screen. This has no mechanical purpose other than to be incredibly charming, and it succeeds tremendously well. Though I am very biased towards ducks. It is time to head on down to the tropical wilds and begin our search for Captain Olimar, nabbing all the fruit we can along the way. Now we start getting some variety with enemy types. We get some new mechanics in the form of having Pikmin dig in these little mounds and dig through collapsed walls, and most importantly, bomb rocks. They've returned, and they're no longer exclusive to yellow Pikmin, being able to be carried by any kind of Pikmin now, as it should be. It's a very nice touch that we get to backtrack through the areas we started in, now being inhabited by creatures, with many new paths opened by our captains and Pikmin variety. You may have noticed, but not only are the areas in Pikmin 3 larger and more impressive, but they are also absolutely packed with content. These areas are both huge and dense, making the scale feel far more justified and less empty, though there are some drawbacks to the very way this game is set up. The first Pikmin was small, intuitive, and simple. Not a lot of explanation was needed, and when it was given, there was a narrative flow to it, being a part of Olimar's notes and inner monologue. Pikmin 3 did undoubtedly lose some of that simplistic charm and ease of use with the impressive broadening of mechanics and scope, though both approaches are valid, and each has strengths and weaknesses. I should also say, just because it's more complex and large, doesn't mean the game sacrificed its approachability. The opposite is actually true if you ask me. Pikmin 3 is extremely user and beginner friendly with its difficulty curve and abundance of information, though the difficulty curve, or rather the lack of one, is something I will talk about before too much longer. Now, in contrast to my first Pikmin video, which had a far greater emphasis on the narrative of Olimar's journey, there's not as much of that in this video, and here is why. Pikmin 3 has far less packed into it as far as important moments. In Pikmin 1, every time you recovered or even found a ship part, it was a big deal. There was 30 pieces, and each one felt important, even if they weren't all essential. In both 2 and 3, however, the collectibles are far more of a passive affair. Yes, you're still hunting for them, but they are abundant, and no great importance is placed on any one of them. Indeed, in Pikmin 3, there's barely any importance placed on them, as the primary objectives are finding your crew, finding the drive key, and then it all coalesces into simply find Olimar. Fruit is abundant enough that you can just pick it up whenever you happen upon it, and you'll make it through the main game just fine. With that in mind, as well as the scale and density of each area, it becomes far harder to both construct a linear narrative as well as becoming far harder to want to construct one. Though in many ways, that works to the game's strength as it keeps the pace consistently in your control. You can ignore the main objectives and spend as much time as you want gathering fruit and making Pikmin. The only only day limit in the game is dictated by how much juice you have, and if you decide to gather fruit more actively, you'll likely have all the time you could want to explore and wander. Same as the narrative, I'd love to be able to go into detail about all the new creatures and such that we encounter, but if I did, we'd be here all day. The lack of narrative restraints works great in Pikmin 3 since it allows the polished mechanics and core gameplay loop to shine, and shine it does because it was all polished to a blinding sheen by the development team. Even the simple additions like being able to tell a captain to go to a certain place on the map and having them do it autonomously adds to the efficiency and time management focus of Pikmin. So far, it's been an absolute treat to play. Getting back to the progression for a moment has our team navigating the tropical landscape towards the signal that we believe may be Olimar. Following it leads us to holy fluffy buttermilk Jesus pancakes wire its lips like that. The enemy designs in this game are like if Wind Waker was a horror game designed by Hideo Kojima. They're very unsettling and look like something I'd draw. They're very effective. Once again, we have a boss fight, and once again, though it's not all that difficult, it is engaging with some new mechanics to it. The Meerslug will burrow down into the soft soil and create a pit trap, much like an antlion, attempting to swallow any Pikmin unfortunate enough to fall into it. After avoiding the pit, the Meerslug will tunnel around the arena before finally popping out to spit boulders at us. This is the only time it's vulnerable, so we march up the little hill it creates around itself and have our Pikmin give it a friendly massage. This pattern repeats throughout the fight, with the pit trap it creates eventually encompassing most of the arena. The struggle is over before too long, and our Pikmin's massaging has the Meerslug so relaxed it falls over and spits out an entire watermelon. Oh, and more importantly, a flip phone with a lovely ferret background pic. Recovering this will allow our search capacity to expand even further and bring us one step closer to Olimar. Our capabilities now boosted, we can head down to the Twilight River, an area that I have quite a bit to say about, starting with the fact that the weather can change. Once again, something that holds no mechanical value, but does hold tremendous value for the atmosphere and charm of the game. So much effort and love was poured into this game. Shortly after arriving, we can spot a pink onion caught in some kind of web across the small river. We must help our little friends, so finding a way to navigate the current is crucial. The means to do so comes in the form of these lily pads, drifting gently down the stream. We can hitch a ride on top of them and get around that way, allowing us to explore and find the pieces to build a bridge. Don't worry, little winged friends, I'm on my way. After dispatching this spider-like creature, we can finally have access to the most underutilized Pikmin type, winged Pikmin. They're adorable, both insect and fairy in their appearance, and they can fly, which you would think would make all kinds of interesting scenarios, but alas, they are used very sparingly, save for a boss later that needs exclusively them. Winged Pikmin can also pluck certain kinds of plants, they can lift bamboo gates, and they can fly over water, which makes them a very good option for transporting things, except that the trade-off is that they are incredibly weak, fragile, and slow when carrying things. In a level like this that's made with them in mind, it actually works amazingly. However, the rest of the game isn't really designed like that, meaning that unless they're necessary, after this area is done, I'll never use them again. I mentioned that I wanted to avoid Pikmin 4 comparisons, and I do, but I will say that even in 4, winged Pikmin get the short end of the stick. With enough of them, the winged Pikmin can lift this nearby log and free up the current as well as new lily pads for us to travel on. As we do that, we get a call on our co-pad, and it's my favorite Pikmin character, the feral menace to society known as Louie. It appears he was also with Olimar and is presently in danger of some kind. Though knowing Louie, I'd say the local wildlife are more in danger here. Dude will kill and eat anything, and I love him for it. Let's set off down the river and see what awaits down this new path. The current brings us even closer to Louie, though the crew are still under the impression that he's Captain Olimar, and as such will do whatever it takes to save him. First though, we have a huge amount of ground to explore. This area is absolutely huge and surprisingly complex to navigate, incorporating every last bit of it into worthwhile exploration. There's many shortcuts to open, many areas to wander and get lost in, and many small puzzles and encounters to sink our teeth into. Speaking of, how dare you, the lesser part may be true, but I'm no mock bottom. Here's a case in point for winged Pikmin being underutilized. Part of their strength is that they're fantastic fighters when it comes to aerial combat, However, there's not really many airborne enemies to utilize that strength. This area has one single swarm of these Scornets, which are designed to be fought only by winged Pikmin, but that's the only swarm of Scornets in the game outside of the boss battle that is also in this area. The mechanic of winged Pikmin lifting up these planks is also introduced far too late and far too seldom used to justify the winged Pikmin, which leaves us with a fantastic idea with a very anemic execution. Instead of puzzles based around them being implemented into all the areas to encourage further revisiting, it's all either endgame or surface level in a way that feels forced. Like they came up with the idea of winged Pikmin too late into the development cycle and didn't have the proper time to design around it. Or maybe they just didn't have any substantial ideas about how to balance that integration well without delegitimizing the other Pikmin types. Either way, this area is the only place to get to shine, so let's talk about that shining moment, shall we? With the way open, our team can make their way up this huge, gorgeous tree stump and meet our next boss, who is, naturally, another unnatural horror. The mechanics here remind me of an old platformer-style boss. We stay evasive, dodging the Scornet swarms it sends at us, and attacking when it's vulnerable. I'd love to talk about it more, but this fight is over almost as fast as it starts if you brought enough winged Pikmin with you. This is one of the final bosses of the game. This is pathetic. What's not pathetic is this. Seeing an entire party of Pikmin marching in a massive line, carrying an innumerable number of enemy bodies back to the onion is tremendously satisfying and rewarding. This might be one of my favorite moments in Pikmin 3. Outside of that, we also achieved the rescue of Louie, or rather the person they still believe to be Olimar, which is an accomplishment that will have some consequences very shortly. As of right now, the forced sleep function of Louie's suit has him harmlessly slumbering, which means we need to wait for him to wake up on his own before we can ask him for answers, though Louie being conscious is a dangerous thing. Before that, it's worth mentioning that Super Spicy Spray makes a return from Pikmin 2 with the function being the same, offering a buff to movement speed and attack power. I had neglected to mention this so far, as I only used it on maybe 2 or 3 occasions in this playthrough, which brings me nicely to a point I've been hinting at this entire video. This game is laughably easy. If I were to use the spray as liberally as in the previous game, the entire game would cease to have any challenge at all. In 3, your Pikmin can take far more punishment before they perish, enemies have far less health and resistance to your attacks, and from what I can tell, they all seem to be far less aggressive. Even the bosses go down in 2 or 3 good rounds, with the only exception being the Mirror Slug and the final boss, which has entirely the opposite problem. Pikmin 3 is clearly intended as an entry point into the series, but it sets such a low bar for difficulty and strategy that playing this game as your introduction leads to nothing but frustration when you play the previous games. It's an incredibly baffling aspect of the game. It's gorgeous, it's dense, it's well designed for the most part, with incredible creatures and environments. It has so many well-polished quality of life improvements and new mechanics that keep things fresh and interesting throughout its huge areas, and it all feels oddly hollow, because the combat and strategy has been so watered down that any tension is now gone from combat. I don't feel accomplished when I kill a Bulborb with no casualties. There's no frantic back and forth with the bosses. In Pikmin 3, you are the most dangerous thing on PNF 404, and it's not even remotely close until the final battle, a final battle that's now in sight. So let's return to our story. Upon landing the next day, Louie wakes up. God help us all. He steals all of our juice, and Charlie's Ducky presumably runs straight through a rock formation because Louie is an unstoppable force of nature and takes off for the deepest part of this map. If we don't either recover Louie today or find some more fruit, our crew will starve tonight. Which sounds far more ominous than it actually is, since Louie opened up a whole new part of the area that's packed with more than enough fruit to last several days. Again, a very forgiving game. An even bigger problem here is the blue Pikmin. Bet you forgot they existed, yeah? The final stretch before the last boss area is where we get blue Pikmin, and in a way that feels even more forced than the winged Pikmin. Just like our floating friends, the place we get blues is designed very much around them and their aquatic abilities, and it feels wrong. This feels bad. This feels as if they forgot about blue Pikmin until they were designing the endgame and felt obligated to shove them on in there. Not to say this area is bad, there's a fair amount of satisfying designs here that makes use of the blues, but it feels far too little and far too late. As if an entire game's blue Pikmin functionality was forced into this one small part of this specific area. Sadly, this also means I don't have a whole lot to say about it. Louie stealing all your juice and leading you on a desperate chase to recover it is a fantastic idea that could have really shaken up the late game, yet it just feels like what we've been doing the entire game anyway. Picking up fruit as we follow a signal. As soon as you find the various fruit in the area, the tension is gone. Nothing feels fresh here either. The entire thing with Louie could have just not happened and nothing would be changed, save for having one less boss. This feels like blatant padding, and the only reason I enjoy it at all is because Louie is a fascinating mystery of a man that I am hellbent on unraveling if it's the last thing I do. I mentioned one more boss though, so let's see about our next alien horror, eh? Now this is a Pikmin boss. This huge hulking thing will stomp around the arena, crushing Pikmin and creating pools of water that make the arena even more hazardous. You need to attack one of its feet to cause it to fall, and once it does, it's time to lay into the center area. But when you do that, it'll also use this awful tongue attack that can swallow a huge number of Pikmin if you don't avoid it in time. And this is the first time a boss in this game has taken down a substantial number of my Pikmin. Partially because it's a challenge, partially because at this point I was getting impatient and a wee bit careless. Regardless, I do love this boss. This feels like Pikmin, and it's a great fight that's bogged down by the fact that it's an outlier and takes place in a part of the game where everything starts to feel artificially drawn out. Our monstrous enemy falls and spits out an entire ass melon, as well as the one and only Louie. With our juice supply recovered and Louie safely restrained, we're now free to either hit the final area or continue to explore and collect fruit and optional upgrades. Let's jump straight into the final bit and see how Pikmin 3 wraps up. Apropos of nothing, but Louie now floats around the ship like the rubber ducky, and seeing his face drift on by is just, it's perfect. With Louie finally cooperating and answering a few questions, we now know where Olimar is, and we know that he likely has knowledge of where our cosmic drive key is. So let's go get him. The aptly named Formidable Oak is in a previously unseen biome. It's arid, it's devoid of the lush foliage we normally associate with Pikmin. It's a gnarled and dry old tree stump surrounded by cacti. Here we find Olimar being fawned over by this peculiar golden creature that can change its shape and size at will, though it seems rather weak, so after dispatching it, we can just grab Olimar and go. Though our Pikmin don't seem to know where exactly to go, so it's up to Brittany to guide them, bringing in one final mechanic that lends itself well to this gauntlet. The Pikmin carrying Olimar will follow Brittany as we work our way through the labyrinth inside the tree, constantly being pursued by the seemingly invincible sentient goop. While there's no serious consequence for the creature retaking Olimar, as we can just attack it and retrieve him rather quickly, this still has a very high pressure feeling to it. Even though you know it's not game over or even a major setback, it still makes you hypervigilant and keeps you frantic while you try to navigate your way around this maze, all while also keeping an eye on Olimar and Brittany. I got to experience this for the first time while making this video, and that added a lot to how on edge I was the entire time. I mentioned before that I never beat the game the first time I played it, and the point where I quit was right before the Formidable Oak. I had gotten bored by the second to last boss, and I just lost interest in finishing it. Getting to experience this for the first time was well worth it, because this is a true test of your ability, one the game didn't really prepare you for. If you recall, I mentioned the final boss having the opposite issue of the others, and this is where I'll talk about it. It's hard. Quite hard if you're not sure what to expect. The game doesn't prepare you to be ready to use every single Pikmin type alongside each other, but that's exactly what's required here, and it's done under duress, which is not a good way to introduce a mechanic like this. This is certainly a great ending struggle if looked at in isolation, but in the context of the game, it feels like it comes out of nowhere. The final boss being this vaguely supernatural sci-fi amalgamation with an amorphous body that's controlled by some kind of hypercube doesn't help matters. All the bosses and enemies here have been, yes, monstrous, but all felt natural enough that they fit in. This does not. This feels like the Water Wraith, but even that had a form, it had a body, and it had personality. While this Plasma Wraith is undeniably terrifying in its unknowable nature and mysterious motives, it doesn't feel like it fits. Having said all of that, for someone experienced with Pikmin, this is a blast to get through. It was challenging, frustrating, rewarding, and a good test to determine whether you're ready for that final fight. Even though I passed the test, I was not ready. Upon reaching the exit of the labyrinth, it's time for the climactic confrontation with our creepy formless foe. The mechanics are simple. When you see the cube, attack it, then attack the plasma that falls off. The execution itself, however, damn near executed me. The Plasma Wraith will run around, launching all manner of attacks as it breaks off into different parts, all with different elemental properties, which doesn't sound too bad if it was one at a time. See, it breaks off into several pieces at once, and while also attacking you with its main body, turning the entire area into a veritable death trap that will take out your Pikmin if you're unprepared. And I was unprepared. I went into this fight thinking it would be similar in difficulty and scope to the rest of the game. It is not. The leap in difficulty here is massive and comes way out of left field. This fight has mountains more going on than anything you've faced until now, and it's far more difficult to navigate while keeping the correct Pikmin types organized and working separately than any other place in the game. I was shocked into a state of panic, which could be argued is an effective way to present an imposing final boss, preying on your lack of preparation and expectations. However, the leap here is just far too much. If you know what to expect, this fight probably isn't too bad, but from the perspective of a newcomer who picked up Pikmin 3 because of its overall low difficulty, this is bad design. After the Plasma Wraith is finally dealt with, Olimar apologizes to us about Louie being Louie, and gives us our Cosmic Drive key back, which means it's a happy ending for our Kopai-bound friends. They can head back home with a new food supply and a source of hope for their struggling home planet. The Pikmin bid us farewell, and the ending scene and narration kick in, giving us a wonderful wrap-up to the adventure. The credits roll over the scenes of the Pikmin and other wildlife on PNF 404 going about their lives in our absence. It's a relentlessly charming way to send off the player after this wild adventure. So, Pikmin 3 Deluxe is an enigma for me. There's so much about this game that is fantastic. There's so much to praise and so much to enjoy, and 3 kicks up the endearing nature of the series to an 11. Yet there's so much holding it back from being a game I would consider great. Pikmin 3 Deluxe is a good game, make no mistake there. This is a wonderfully polished and enjoyable experience that I would definitely recommend to anyone who would listen. However, there's a lot of problems and shortcomings that prevent me from calling it great. The uneven difficulty curve, which is really more of a plateau with one massive peak, the poor pacing and feeling like it goes on too long for its own good, the oddly hollow feeling that I got while playing it, there's much to take into account. Many of these issues feel like they stem from growing pains that came about as a result of expanding the Pikmin formula so heavily and rapidly that it simply became stretched too thin. The first game, while it's had its issues, it felt complete. It felt just right in length, in scope, in complexity. It used its limitations to enrich the experience. And the second game... So Pikmin 3 Deluxe is a hard-to-place game in terms of where one might put it on a scale. But it's still too early to talk about that. There's more. That's right, sit back down and get cozy. We're not done yet. I said sit down. Not content to just give us Pikmin 3 but a little cleaned up, Nintendo added a ton of stuff to the deluxe version. Most notably, the side stories, in which we get added context on Olimar and Louie's reason for being back on PNF 404 in the first place. These are expanded versions of the things you can find in challenge mode, with added cutscenes, logs that are frankly amazing, and a ton of added character to Olimar and Louie. So, let's play some more Pikmin. Worth mentioning before that is, in addition to all the quality of life improvements in this remaster, they also added the Piclopedia and gave every single captain their own separate entry for each creature. I could spend an entire video just talking about all these entries and how they help flesh out every character even further. Suffice it to say, I like this a lot. Let's dive in with Olimar's assignment. This takes place before and during the main story and opens with an absolutely amazing cutscene of Olimar recording a log as Louis runs for his life off camera. Almost every cutscene plays like this, and it's progressively funnier every time. I definitely recommend watching these even if you can't play the actual game. As far as the meat of it, we can see very clearly the framework for the challenges in Pikmin 4. It's almost identical. We have a simple objective in a small but dense area, a timer, and a progress bar that will tell us whether we're on track for a bronze, silver, gold, or platinum medal. In this case, our objective is to gather as much fruit and treasure as we can, and this is incredibly fun. The tiny area and limited resources really make you think differently about how to use Pikmin and how to prioritize your actions. It feels really nice to play. I'm definitely not a completionist, but this had me naturally trying my best to hit that platinum medal and optimize as much as I could. It nails what it was going for, and it offers a peek behind the curtain at the mindset Nintendo had while Pikmin 4 was being developed. Now, Olimar's assignment is the shorter of the two side stories with only 4 days to it. It's short, it's sweet, and it gives context for Olimar's presence in the main story. Olimar and Louis were sent out, once again, by the true evil of the universe, a businessman. Once more, Hakatate Freight is in financial peril due to some terrible decisions in business endeavors, so naturally, Olimar once again gets torn from his family and thrown into peril for the good of the struggling company. Oh, and Louis was sent too for some reason. No one, including Olimar, is really sure why. In the second cutscene log entry, Olimar mentions that he never tires of treasure hunting here on PNF 404, whilst Louis gets knocked around and flops like a fish next to a blue Pikmin, and Olimar goes right back to speaking completely unbothered by Louis' predicament. The relationship between these two is absolutely amazing, and it really enhances the character of them both. It also makes me question why we didn't get Louis as an Echo Fighter in Smash. He could have been so OP. The second verse is the same as the first here, collecting fruit and nuggets within the time limit with limited resources. None of the missions in Olimar's assignment are all that difficult, but they're still incredibly fun to play thanks to the quick, bite-sized nature of them. The next mission opens with Olimar once again expressing how much he enjoys treasure hunting here as Louis gets attacked by Scornets and Olimar muses about getting an upgrade to his partner. God damn, Olimar. This one is also just collecting all the fruit you can in the time limit, so there's not much to unpack other than how Olimar feels about Louis, which, again, the opening and ending logs are amazing. The fourth and final day is more of the same, and it ends with Olimar being captured off camera by the Plasma Wraith as Louis runs for his life. When I said short and sweet, I meant it. This mode can be cleared in about an hour, but there's plenty of replay value to get better scores and times. But the good news is that Olimar and Louis have plenty more to do as we take a look at Olimar's comeback. Olimar's comeback takes place after the main game. Having returned to Hakatate via our Kopite crew, the Dolphin was left behind in an inoperable state, and the president of Hakatate Freight was livid about this. So they're sent back to recover the ship parts and fly the company property back, no matter the cost to their lives. This mode is more than double the length and has far more challenging and varied objectives to them. Your first mission is to collect as many Pikmin as possible in the time limit. The second and third is to kill as many enemies as possible within the time limit, which can be pretty challenging since the areas where you do this are stuffed with enemies in a very small area, which keeps the fights pretty high energy. The fourth objective mixes things up though. You start with a ship part in your base and need to escort it to the ship on the other side of the map, with your score being based on how fast you manage to do this. Of course, it won't be that simple though, since there's bridges to be built, walls to be destroyed, and hungry enemies everywhere. It makes you consider your options pretty well. Do you try to get the part on its way from the start and hope you can make the route open and safe in time? Do you clear the area completely first and then get the part on its way? Maybe a middle ground approach works better for you. It's a very fun little challenge to throw in, and a few more missions will have this objective. I should mention that while there's no cutscenes outside of the first one, the logs before and after the missions are still there, and they're still just as amazing to read. I definitely recommend it. Mission 5 is another kill as many as you can type, but this time you start with Louis and Olimar separated, having to trade Pikmin back and forth and help open paths for each other. The time limit and enemy objective makes this really fun since it has you running all over trying to figure out how each captain can help the other. It's a ton of fun. For day 6, it's back to collecting fruit and treasure, but it takes place in the Twilight River, now drained of all its water and crawling with enemies, which is a very neat way to mix up the area and the challenge. Day 7 is a little little different, with the objective being to reunite the two captains, starting both at opposite sides of the map. The challenge here is that you have very limited Pikmin for each captain and a lot of very dangerous enemies between you two. This is the most Pikmin has ever felt like a stealthy survival game, and it's really refreshing, especially after I complained about being too powerful in the main game. Here, you need to carefully pick your battles and plan your route, or it's game over. You are the prey in an area full of predators. It also shows more of the wholesome aspects of the relationship between Louie and Olimar as they worry about one another while attempting to meet back up. Day 8 is fruit collecting, but the fruits are big and you have winged Pikmin, and Day 9 is a doozy. Day 9 has you doing another part escort, except you have no way to make more Pikmin at all. What you can find in the area is what you will have. There's candy pop buds to change Pikmin types as needed, but there isn't a way to replenish your numbers. This puts you in an interesting place since numbers is what you rely on to fight and clear your way. Again, this is a really fun way to mix things up, and it was a good challenge. I enjoyed it. How does this mode end off, you might ask? Why, in a very interesting way, that's how. You start with 20 of each red, blue, and yellow Pikmin. There's candy pop buds for other types, and the area is incredibly small, but packed with enemies that all require you to use a specific type of Pikmin. And they're all right next to each other, so you better get good at managing individual squads of Pikmin, or else you're going to be screwed. That's really it. It's a very simple premise with a very small area, and it works pretty well for a final challenge. With that cleared, we get this painfully cute ending cutscene of the Pikmin seeing Olimar off while singing along to the ending track. I know I keep saying it, but damn it, this game is so charming. So with that done, there's nothing left to talk about, right? Well, not exactly. There is also a challenge mode, which features objectives like the side story modes, just without the narrative setup, and with the addition of purple and white Pikmin, which are otherwise not in the game. There's also a boss challenge mode that's unlocked after beating the game if you really didn't get enough of those fights for some reason. All of them have time limits and varying conditions that spice things up for all you maniacs out there, but the side stories were enough for me for the sake of this video. Also here is the bingo battle mode I mentioned, in which you and a friend compete to collect things on a bingo card before the other, with power-ups and traps and such being at play as well, making it a genuinely great time. Sadly, it's only 2-player, and I have no player 2, so for right now, you'll have to check it out for yourself. I definitely recommend it. And with that, I'm done for now. The takeaway is that overall, Pikmin 3 Deluxe is an incredible package. Even with the many issues I had with the main story mode, the other modes, the extreme charm and polish, the sheer amount of content, altogether it makes up for its weaknesses. So my final thought is just that Pikmin 3 Deluxe is a good game. It's not great, but it's pretty good, and I had plenty of fun playing it for this video. Speaking of this video, if you're still watching, thank you so much. It'd mean a ton if you'd consider hitting the subscribe button and dropping a like so I can spread like a plague across YouTube. If you like what I'm doing, I do have a Discord and a Patreon where you can support for as little as $2 a month, and the links to those and some other stuff are in the description below. Between these videos, I've also started streaming here on YouTube if you really can't get enough of my content, and I have some experiments and big projects coming down the line as well. I'd like to give a very big thank you to my Patreon supporters. You all are incredible and help me make this stuff. And until next time, I love you all.